The wait for the Switch 2 is almost over, and you know what that means? It's time to play some GameCube games! Oh sure, there's a new Mario Kart game that I suppose you could be playing, but don't forget that expansion pack subscribers will have full access to 3 great games that were first released 22 years ago on the GameCube. I'm talking about F-Zero GX, SoulCalibur II, and of course The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Yeah, that's cool news. But are any of these games actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Edge, Nintendo Power, and more classic magazines that reviewed these games when they first came out. Plunge headfirst into the vortex of destiny in this new episode of Nintendo Classics Review Crew.
Customize your own machine and race through 20 gravity-defying courses at ridiculous speeds. F-Zero GX, the future of racing is in your hands, only for Nintendo GameCube. Rated T for Teen. GameCube.
This is a good time to be an F-Zero fan. While it's true that F-Zero 99 is the closest that we've come to a new installment in like 20 years, Nintendo has actually been pretty good about porting the older games to Nintendo Classics. Not that long ago, we got both F-Zero GP Legend and F-Zero Climax, the latter only getting an American release 2 decades after it debuted in Japan. Now we're getting GameCube games on the Switch too, and what did Nintendo pick to lead the charge? That's right, it's F-Zero. Well, F-Zero GX to be precise. That's the 2003 racer from Sega's Amusement Vision that once again reinvented the series for a brand new console. Is it fast? Absolutely. Is it challenging? Oh yeah. But is it fun? Well, let's see how the critics answered that question. Let's kick things off with Electronic Gaming Monthly, which in this case means starting at the very bottom. Giving F-Zero GX a 7.8 out of 10, No English Language Magazine gave the racer a lower score than EGM. Demian summed it up this way: I've got no beef with hard games, really, I don't, as long as I'm still having fun. But when the difficulty level gets to the point where I'd rather be doing something else, maybe some nice vacuuming, that's a problem. A few of F-Zero GX's later race classes and story missions gave me that vacuuming urge something powerful. Improved graphics aside, I really wish that Nintendo had done more to update the series. The new story mode is a nice diversion from the Grand Prix races, but a more fleshed out career mode would have added a lot of replayability. And I know that it's like a broken record at this point, but man, if ever there was a Nintendo title that was crying out for online, Paul agreed with Demian's frustration. If you're a fiend of futuristic racing, buy F-Zero GX, clear your schedule, and enjoy. But if you're not a hardcore fan of the genre, GX will fast make you furious. The game's punishing difficulty will push many gamers past single expletive exclamations and into an extended rant of DEFCON 1 level profanity. As we climb our way up the scale, we see Blender take time out of their busy schedule of fawning over the latest pop princess in order to give F-Zero a 4 out of 5, while Edge went with an 8 out of 10. Game Informer went as high as an 8.25 out of 10, with Rainer explaining that like its predecessors, F-Zero GX is an attractive game that continually dazzles the eye with vibrant designs and tremendous speed. The split-screen multiplayer is decent, but it's not as intense as battling the large field in single-player. F-Zero GX is just as entertaining as it is frustrating. If you've broken controllers before, it might be in your best interest to skip it. Conversely, if you seek a challenge, you'll get it in spades. Now, unlike some of the games that we're going to talk about today, there was actually a ceiling for these F-Zero reviews, and that was around 90%. You saw that when GMR gave it a 9 out of 10 in their 9th issue, which is similar to the 4.5 out of 5 that you saw from GamePro. When GBA World took a second to review console games, they also gave it a 4.5 out of 5. asking if the newest title could possibly live up to the legacy of the brand. Thankfully, the answer to that question is a big yes. This game pushes the power of the GameCube to the max, presenting a bustling world brimming with bright lights, dark horizons, barren landscapes, and oh, so much more. And while it really is a wonder to behold, the visuals ultimately take a back seat to the speed that has been the hallmark of the series from day one. It runs so fast that some of the wussier GBA World staff actually got motion sickness from looking at the screen. F-Zero is a fast, challenging, and beautiful racing experience. Check it out. One of the reasons why this re-release is so damn exciting is because we don't get a lot of futuristic racing games anymore, especially from Nintendo. Even though the critics are right that it is incredibly tough, F-Zero GX is worth overcoming that learning curve. It really is one of the best games in the series, and with an overall average of 84%, the critics recommend it. That is, unless you're a wussy that gets motion sickness, apparently.
Right, Link, my friend, here's your goods. Should have give those SoulCalibur fighters a right stick. But that sword you're using, pardon my pun, ain't gonna cut it, mate. Toss that dodgy dagger and take hold of this.
The wait's over. SoulCalibur II finally puts the weapons back in your hands, featuring classic SoulCalibur fighters, new warriors, and over 10 modes of play. And exclusively on the Nintendo GameCube, Link joins the fun.
How about off price?
SoulCalibur II, rated T for teen.
When Namco released Soul Blade on the PlayStation, it was a big hit with both critics and consumers, but was ultimately overshadowed by another fighting game from the exact same company, Tekken. That, however, was not the case 2 years later when the follow-up, SoulCalibur, launched on the Dreamcast, quickly becoming the first must-own game for Sega's fledgling console. With everybody still head over heels in love with the previous installment, the hype was real for SoulCalibur II. And not just because it featured a cameo from none other than Link. This was quickly becoming the critics' favorite fighting series, so expectations were extremely high for the follow-up. Let's go ahead and see if it lived up to the hype. This time around, we're just going to start at the lowest review and work our way up. That means that we're going to kick things off with Game Informer, who gave this fighting game the worst marks of any English language magazine. Giving it an 8.75 out of 10, Rayner argued that the GameCube version has the edge because of one very cool addition. I had my doubts as to how he would fit into the fold, but after putting this game through its paces, Link is now, far and away, my favorite character in the SoulCalibur roster. In my humble opinion, he's reason enough to invest in the GameCube version. If you're worried about the controller not being able to handle this fighter's fevered gameplay pitch, rest easy. This game was designed for the GameCube controller. There is one trouble zone, however. If you prefer playing with a digital pad, this unit's microscopic D-pad is a definite turnoff. Believe it or not, Game Informer was the only magazine to give the game lower than a 90%. You saw GBA World give the game a 4.5 out of 5, confirming that yes, they do indeed review more than Game Boy Advance games. GMR gave the game a 9 out of 10, as did Edge. Or did they? You see, in this issue, and only this issue, they annoyingly opted to hide the review scores, resulting in SoulCalibur II getting a question mark out of 10. Yeah, make no mistake about it though, they really did give it a 9, concluding that the sequel is too similar to the previous game and a tad on the easy side. Though this is undeniably a relatively conservative sequel, since every other beat-em-up franchise has singularly failed to learn anything from SoulCalibur's brilliance, any similarity is no bad thing. With every other beat-em-up having failed to equal, let alone exceed the original, it seems churlish to criticize the sequel for merely matching and updating it. Ultimately, though it might not have the same impact, this is a game that's superior to its predecessor in almost every way, which means that it's also superior to every other 3D beat-em-up. As we work our way up the scale, we see Play give the fighting game sequel an A-, while Electronic Gaming Monthly went all the way up to an average score of 9.7 out of 10. That puts it as the magazine's 4th best reviewed game of 2003, behind only Mario Kart Double Dash, Metroid Prime, and, spoiler alert, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. With 2 of the editors giving the game a perfect 10 out of 10 score, Shane was the odd man out. He agreed with the consensus that the game looks great, plays great, and is loads of fun when going up against friends, but he found that the single-player component was a bit lacking. I'm not overly impressed with SoulCalibur II's single-player game. Versus mode never gets old, but I don't always have dorks like Shu and Sean around to challenge. The Weapon Master stuff offers unlocking thrills for a few hours, but it's over way too quickly, and it's too simple to open up all this stuff with little effort. I sincerely wish that SoulCalibur II had taken a page from Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution's Quest mode. Not only can you customize your character with more than 1,500 unique accessories, you can also fight insanely tough AI opponents based on Japan's best tournament players. Limitless challenge and discovery are sorely lacking in Calibur. Now, when it comes to the perfect scores, there are a couple of magazines to choose from here. Nintendo Power loved it, giving it a 5 out of 5, but the magazine that I want to look at is GamePro. Giving it the same 5 out of 5 score, they explained that the good news for GameCube owners is that SoulCalibur II looks and sounds fantastic. The bad news is that the GameCube controller is not ideal for fighting games, and this holds true for SoulCalibur II. However, once you overcome the controller, SoulCalibur II's winning combination of fluid gameplay and a well-thought-out fighting system is all the reward you'll need to play it for months on end. Link and SoulCalibur II are a combo that GameCube owners are gonna want to supersize. Big time. You know, it's funny they say that, because just 2 years later, GamePro started their SoulCalibur III write-up by claiming that everyone can pretty much agree that SoulCalibur II was a big disappointment. Was it? Everybody agrees about that? That's odd, because the same magazine gave SoulCalibur II a perfect 5 out of 5. I mean, if that's what you consider a big disappointment, then I wish more games were big disappointments, because this game is great and you should definitely play it on the Switch too.
For a limited time, buy the Nintendo GameCube for only $149.95 and receive The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, or one of 3 other great games, free. Whoops.
I want to take you back to 2001, when the world got its first look at a very cartoony cel-shaded Link. To say that people were shocked would be a gross understatement. Many were outraged, hating that it resembled a kid's game. I mean, we finally have this amazing hardware that could easily pump out a breathtaking, realistic Zelda game, but what they showed off looked like a Saturday morning cartoon. What was Nintendo thinking? Of course, today we know that it was because the developers felt that the edgier Zelda game that was shown off at Space World 2000 was too derivative of past entries and they wanted to do something new. But people back then were not pleased with the new direction. And then a funny thing happened. When The Wind Waker was eventually released on March 24th, 2003, you stopped hearing people whine and cry about the cartoony look. New and old fans alike were completely won over by the game's charm and epic adventure. Let's go ahead and see how the critics navigated that controversy. This time around, we're going to start with Electronic Gaming Monthly, which is smack dab in the middle of the review scale with an average score of 9.8 out of 10. That's right, the middle score is just 0.2 of a point away from being a perfect mark. Speaking of Mark, he's the only EGM editor that did not give the game a perfect 10. What the hell were we all so worried about? The Wind Waker's toon-shaded look once seemed like a daring risk, but after actually trying the finished game, it's hard to imagine it any other way. In short, Nintendo achieved its goal. Playing Zelda feels like you're controlling a cartoon. Maybe that's why 5 different people watching me play immediately said the exact same thing. Damn, that animation is incredible! I have 2 minor complaints with Wind Waker. First, it's a bit too easy. Second, the boat Link rides everywhere. Yes, it's a cool method to get around. And yes, it makes for some special moments, like when you're stuck in the chop during a thunderstorm. But my trouble is, you're sailing a lot. But these are minor quibbles next to everything that Zelda does so well. Greg liked the game even more than that. I don't really have any complaint about the Wind Waker. I was never frustrated or seriously lost, and I never found a boss fight too difficult. My biggest concern with Zelda was actually forcing myself to stop playing it so that I could get some sleep before I had to go to work the next day. I can't recommend this game enough. It's yet another masterpiece in the Legend of Zelda series. Now, if you're looking for the negative reviews that are raking the Wind Waker across the coals, then you're not going to find them here. NGC Magazine went a little bit lower than EGM, giving it a 96%. Even the often grumpy magazine Edge didn't go lower than a 9 out of 10, which is the same score that Andrew Pfister gave the game in GMR. Even though it starts stronger than it finishes, The Wind Waker is a beautiful and highly enjoyable game. And in many respects, it's the series' best, with spot-on artistic design, perfect animation, wonderfully composed music, a healthy number of interesting side quests, and important tweaks to the combat system. Yet, it's disappointing in other ways, including the small number of dungeons, overdependence on sailing, easy boss battles, a meaningless pace-killing treasure hunt, and a less than satisfying finale. For these reasons, The Wind Waker falls shy of the epic mark set by Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past. Perhaps the lighthearted approach justifies this, or perhaps it's the cause. In any case, it's still an adventure that belongs in every GameCube owner's library. Drop the preconceived notions and give it a fair shot. It's the mature thing to do. As we go to the other side of the review scale, we see that every other magazine opted to give the game a perfect score. GamePro went with a 5 out of 5, as did Nintendo Power. Hell, even Blender took time away from giving out terrible music takes to give Zelda a perfect 5 out of 5. Similarly, Computer and Video Games went with a 10 out of 10, the same score that we saw Rainer give the sequel in Game Informer. I won't ruin too many of the surprises, but I will say that the story is fairly puzzling. It's still a variation on the cliched boy saves girl theme, but the way it's presented is quite different and a nice change of pace for the series. I didn't think the gameplay could get any better than in A Link to the Past, but I was proven wrong when Ocarina of Time hit the market. The same goes for The Wind Waker. The gameplay dynamic hasn't changed much between generations, but it's grown into something far greater, deeper, and more complex than one can fathom. The Wind Waker blows every Zelda game out of the water, and it stands as the video game event of a lifetime. It's an absolute necessity for anyone who considers themselves a gamer. In a lot of ways, The Wind Waker performed exactly like every other Zelda game. Nintendo announces a quirk or a gimmick that part of the audience questions, only to eventually have the critics gush over the final results. You know, it's as if Nintendo might actually know how to make a really good Zelda adventure, and The Wind Waker is no exception. I mean, you can argue about its placement compared to the rest of the franchise, but with an overall score of 97%, the debate is over. The critics loved this game.
In the land of Hyrule, the wind echoes a legend that tells of a boy who became a man. He traveled to the ends of the earth, challenging the forces of nature, testing the limits of his will, all to fulfill his destiny, which is, above all else, to save me.
The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. Rated E for everyone.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes just like this one every time classic games get added to modern consoles. In fact, we have one of these episodes for every single game on the Nintendo Classics app. Now, here's the question I have for you. What GameCube game do you want to see on the Switch too? Man, there are so many to choose from, so I'm excited to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back next week with another countdown of the best and worst games on the Nintendo Classics. I know I said that the Nintendo 64 was next, but it might be the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Well, yeah, wait to find out. I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.